Hi guys, so what I'm going to do for this video is talk you through how do you do an A-level politics essay. And I'm going to do that through talking through one of the essays that was used in the first ever A-level exams that were sat. And that is evaluate the view that think tanks, lobbyists and pressure groups have little impact on government decisions. And I'll talk you through what the examiner report said and how to effectively structure this essay. So what is it that is being evaluated in this essay? So just have a think. What is it that you need to discuss? What is it that you need to think about? And the thing that you are evaluating is the impact on government decisions. So you're thinking about these three groups and you're thinking, do they have an impact or do they not have an impact? What is the extent of their impact? So if that's what you're evaluating, you need to consider what factors can determine whether or not one of these organisations or any of them have actual impact on government decisions. So this is your criteria, thinking about the factors that determine impact. So things like, do they actually create change on government legislation? Have they had any successes on actually changing what government does? So Centre for Social Justice, for example, had a lot of impact on government decisions because they ended up, the co-founder ended up becoming the person who was in charge of benefits in this country, the Secretary of Work and Pensions. But what is it that made that possible? And essentially, they can have impact if they are in line with the government's position. If they are not in line with the government positions, they have even less impact. So it's thinking about think tanks, lobbyists and pressure groups. It's not just asking about pressure groups. You need to talk about all three of these organisations. So think tanks we've spoken about already, and you need to think about what are think tanks, which we talked about in the last lesson. I only really spoke to you about the Centre for Social Justice, but another think tank that's really important is obviously the Fabian Society. So just have a little research into the Fabian Society. Who are they? Have they had impact? And essentially, because they are a left-wing organisation, they have had very little impact on government decisions. So you can see here, and I'll send you the link to this folder, the Fabian Society are a British socialist organisation, so they actually are the founders of the Labour Party. They aim to advance the principles of democratic socialism by focusing on gradualism and reform rather than revolutionary means. Essentially, you can see here that because they are very left-wing, because they are very socialist, they are going to have hardly any impact, if any at all, on the current government, because it is a conservative government. However, when Labour is in power, they have a profound influence on the Labour Party because they were so closely affiliated with them historically, but they are also very ideologically affiliated. So you can see here, they are very influential whilst Tony Blair is in power. There's been around 200 MPs who associate as members of the Fabian think tank in the House of Commons since 1997. They've also been credited for influencing the Labour government's policy on public tax increase as well. Whereas when the Conservatives are in power, they have very little influence. When Labour is in power, they are very influential. So the requirements for this question then is you need to really focus on the influence of government, not on a judgment if they're good or bad. So the question's not saying, are they good or are they bad for democracy? It's saying, how have these different areas had impact, and have they really had impact on government decisions? So what is the extent that they have impacted what government does? You need to also consider a range of factors and circumstances which play a role in affecting how the different groups do or do not influence government. So I almost picture this as having sort of your three main paragraphs. One paragraph will be about pressure groups, comparing two pressure groups, one that has had impact and one that hasn't had impact, and deciding what gave them that impact. Thinking about lobbyists, two examples again, and also thinking about think tanks, two examples again, and comparing the extent to which they've had impact. You need to really make sure as well that you decide more or less at the beginning, before you write your essay, what do you think? Do they have impact or do they not have impact? So you sustain that judgment throughout. I feel like if I was to answer this question, my judgment will be that they only have impact if they are in line with the government's agenda. and you can argue that throughout your essay and just sustain that throughout. So your judgment at the end of each paragraph should be, yes, they have impact only when they have influence, only when they are aligned to the government and so forth. It's also so important that you use up-to-date examples. So in the first exam, one of the areas that students went wrong is they were mentioning older examples. So people were talking about the rights group Fathers for Justice. Although a really important organisation, they were a little bit out of date because they were most active during Tony Blair's premiership, which obviously was quite a long time ago now. So it's better to use up-to-date ones such as Extinction Rebellion, but I feel like we're quite strong on that anyway, so no need to worry too much. So the structure then is, for the introduction, you're defining your key terms and you're showing that you understand the question. And the way that you do that is you identify the debate. You're identifying that there is some controversy over the extent to which these groups do have impact over government decisions, and you're going to say essentially what your line of argument is. That yes, there is a debate over how much they impact government decisions, but ultimately the thing that impacts the most is, are they ideologically similar to the government's aims? Your main body is, as I said before, dealing with each in turn. So a paragraph on think tanks, paragraph on lobbyists, and a paragraph on pressure groups, and thinking about how much that they actually have an impact or don't have an impact. So you can do that in a separate paragraph, but I feel like dealing with it in a paragraph and arguing impact or lack of impact is the strongest way. And then considering, this is like for your top answers, considering which out of the three had the most or the least impact as well. Your conclusion then should be where you're answering the question directly. So please don't sit on the fence. So within your introduction and at the end of each paragraph, you're making your judgment really, really clear. So what your conclusion is it's kind of you stepping away from the essay, looking at it as an overview and making it clear what your position is on this question. Do they have an impact, and why do they have an impact, or why don't they have an impact? So this shouldn't be a surprise to the examiner. It should be a logical development from the line of argument that we've seen throughout the essay. So just making it really clear what it is that you think and having that clear throughout the entire essay.